one of the ideas connected with the coming of Moshiach that Chassidus really focuses on is actually originates the original sources that we have for the idea that the main revelation of Moshiach is associated with the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah, meaning that the main revelation at times of Mashiach is that the deepest secrets of the Torah will be revealed to us. So obviously we have a source in the Zohar, and we have a source in the writings of the Arizal, but we actually have sources in Nigla of Torah, and the revealed aspect of Torah, as the Rambam says in the end of his Hilchos Malachim. The Rambam says that this time, when the time of Mashiach, when we will be free from any outside distractions, is the time when we will know the Jewish people will be very wise, and they will know hidden matters. They will grasp the knowledge of their Creator, to the extent that humans are capable. And he concludes that this is going to be a time of Umola Aretz Deus Hashem, that the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem. Similarly, there's a Rashi, as classic a commentator as we have in Rashi and Shir Hashirim, on the words Yishakeni Minashikos Piyu, that the feminine voice representing the Jewish people says about the masculine beloved, who is Hashem, obviously, in the analogy, that Yishakeni Minashikos Piyu, that in the it's using a future tense, that he will kiss me from the kisses of his mouth. And Rashi says there that he already promised us that he will in the future reveal again the deepest secrets of the Torah to us. So in fact, there's an expression that used by the Rebbe Rashav, the fifth Rebbe, which the Rebbe would quote relatively frequently, that the main revelation of the times of Mashiach, the main thing is this revelation of the hidden secrets of the Torah. This is the main thing. It's not, everything else is secondary to the main point. So, okay, if this is a basic idea, as we said, it's not just the Kabbalistic idea, it appears in the Rambam's work of Halach, it appears in Rashi's commentary on Tanakh, and many other sources as well, but as classic, in the classical sources, this is the emphasis. So Chassidus explains that actually the revelation of Chassidus is a precursor, in a sense, a foretaste, a preparation for those revelations, for the revelation of the secrets of the Torah that will be revealed to us after Mashiach comes. Now, in the language of Chassidus, often borrows from Kabbalistic terminology. So the Kabbalistic terminology that's used to express this idea is that the revelation of Mashiach is associated with the revelation of the level of Torah known as Yechida. What does it mean there's a level of Torah known as Yechida? So it explains that just like we say there's 5 levels to the soul, Nefesh, this is based on a Medrash. The Medrash says the Neshama has 5 names, and as explained in the writings of the in the Zohar and the writings of the Arizal, it's actually talking about 5 different levels within the soul. So Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida, with the highest being Yechida. And similarly, in Torah, there are these 5 levels. Now, in Kabbalah, it explains that in everything there's these 5 levels, but that's not what's relevant as much here. So what is this idea of the Yechida of Torah? And that Chassidus is the beginning of the is the beginning of the revelation of this aspect of Torah known as Yechida. And in fact, it says, it's a source that's brought, Chassidus brought from the Ramaz, Rabbi Moshe Zachos, a renowned Kabbalist, who said that there are five of our greatest leaders represent these 5 levels of soul, that David represents Nefesh, Eliyahu Hanavi represents Ruach, Zoicha, they merited to reach this level of Ruach, Moshe Rabbeinu Neshama, Adam Rishon Chaya, and Mashiach will be the Yechida. So obviously we're not just talking about on an individual level. Each one represents, so to speak, David HaMelech represents the total nefesh of the entire Klal Yisrael, the entire Jewish people as a whole. Eliyahu Hanavi, the Ruach, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Neshama, Adam Rishon, the Chaya, and Mashiach, the Yechida. So, okay, we have these, especially those who have, learned Chassidus to some degree. We come across these terms frequently. The question is, how can we really be able to relate to these ideas? That it was basically, plain folks. How are we supposed to be able to relate to these ideas in terms of understanding and appreciating what we're looking forward to actually increase our anticipation and also to have a greater appreciation of the steps that we take to prepare for this revelation of Moshiach. So it's obviously a very broad topic. It's beyond the scope of a brief class, but what I'm going to try to do here is to give in basic everyday life terms some basic understanding of what it means that a soul has 5 levels. And basically in Kabbalah, it also talks in terms, those who are again familiar with the terminology of the 10 spheres, that besides for there being 10 spheres, within those 10 spheres, there's what's called 5 partsufim. Within those spheres, there are 5 personas. The spheres, altogether, the 10 spheres represent an entire divine entity. But within that, there's 5 distinct personas. There are different names. One is associated with Malchus, one with the emotional traits, one with Bina, one with Chachma, and one with Kesser, the highest. But again, these are words. It's hard to, as the Maral often quoted Chassidus, is we don't even know what a neshama is. So we're talking about different levels. It's really hard sometimes to relate. So what's this idea that within one person, we talk about 5 distinct levels, and each one of these distinct levels has its own soul, so to speak, and yet it all makes up one person. So just to basically understand the way it is in human beings, before we even get to the neshama, to the actual godly soul, even from the perspective of the animal soul, of regular human beings, what does it mean that a human being has 5 different, almost personalities, and each one has its own soul, and yet they all work together to form one person, one unit. So basically, the system is, the way human beings are supposed to develop in a healthy way, is as follows. The first level, the level of nefesh, is the behavioral soul. The behavioral soul means that in the earliest years of a child's life, the way a child relates to the world around it, the way the child learns about the world around it, the way the child interacts with the world around it, is all from the perspective of behavioral. There are people taking care of his needs. There are people providing the child with different things. As he gets older, you see little children, they learn everything by doing. That's how they learn everything. That's how they try. And as they're learning, they'll do the same thing over and over and over. They'll tremendous repetition, because that's how they relate to the world. They relate to the world through doing. They relate to the world through doing. So they could do the same thing over and over and over again until they master it, until they feel comfortable with it. And that's so. And it's not just action; it includes speech. That's how they learn to speak. They're doing it over and over and over again. They hear a new word and they try it out, and they try to use it. And the same thing with their thoughts. As their thoughts, it's basically behavioral. They have, obviously, little children have emotions as well, but their general way of observing reality and interacting with reality, the main thing is behaviorally. And they learn a lot from how their caretakers behave towards them. That's what they learn from. The idea is that a person is supposed to mature and move to level 2. Level 2 is the aspect of ruach, which again it exists in the animal soul, exists in human souls as well. It's just not in holiness, it's in klipas noiga. The next level is the emotional soul. The emotional soul is that they start relating to the world through an entirely different context, through the social context. Their whole, now, all of their behaviors, they're still behaving, they're still doing, they're still trying things out, but all of their behaviors become influenced, and it's how they see the world is through the social context. My friend said this, my mother said that, my father said this, my this said that, I'm doing this. Each thing they're doing is, and it's how they see the world. It's not just a next stage. It literally, they no longer see the world the same way they saw it as a child. They still, it doesn't mean they no longer have within them that child. They still have within them times when they're not being social, and they'll revert to some degree. And sometimes it's useful to hold on to the nefesh. It's not that the nefesh goes away. It's that now there's a whole new personality almost, which is more socially oriented, which is based on emotions. Well, who I like, who I don't like, who I care about, who I don't care about, everything is influenced by their emotional, by their social relationships. It's now a relationship-based world that they live in. Their whole world changed, and their whole personality now took on a whole new dimension, which is the social dimension. The idea is, now, sadly, many people, because they don't have proper upbringing, and because people don't understand the process of progression, and also because we live in a mostly valueless society, really the next step that is supposed to happen after, you're supposed to graduate from seeing the world from the perspective of your social relationships, and you're supposed to move to the next level, which is the level of neshama, the level of understanding, meaning, values, purpose, context. You start seeing things in terms of what's important, what's not important, what is a value, what is not a value, what should be valued, what should be devalued. And now it's not, you didn't stop being a social being, you're still a social being, but you're supposed to be able to choose. When you're a kid, your parents are supposed to keep you away from the wrong people, and keep you away from the wrong relationships, and keep you away from now that once you graduate to the level of being an intelligent being, you're supposed to understand on your own, within the context of your social relationships and your behaviors as well, are now all being looked at in terms of your values, in terms of what is good, what I understand is good for me, what I understand is not good for me, what I understand adds value to my life, what I understand detracts value from my life, what is important, what is significant, what is unimportant, what is insignificant. So it's the same person. You're supposed to mature to the next level, which is seeing the world through a rational context. There's an even higher level, which not everybody ever gets to. The next level is wisdom, to see the world, to find that one overarching purpose that defines what makes my life worth living. What am I all about? Who am I? What am I all about? What is that one thing that ties together all the parts of my life, that this is really my true purpose in life, my singular purpose in life? Yes, I still understand. I still approach the world from a position of understanding what's good for me, what's not good for me. I still have social relationships. I'm connected emotionally. I have all kinds of relationships. Hopefully, at that level of maturity, you should have a spouse, children, friends. You should be part of a larger social framework. But the idea of the fourth level, the level of Chaya, is that one, again, one overarching purpose that ties all the pieces of my life together. This is what my life is dedicated to. This is what my life is devoted to. In fact, there's an interesting Farbrengen from the Rebbe Rashab, where the Rebbe Rashab actually says, you could tell from even though they don't bring the responses, but you could tell from the way he was talking in those days, when the Rebbe would Farbreng, so Chassidim would say in certain things. So in some of the Farbrengens, they actually record what the Chassidim said, what the Chassidim asked. But even in this Farbrengen, you can see that this Chassidim are struggling with the idea. But the Rebbe Rashab says that Chochma is, he uses the word hismatzos. That's what Chochma is. Chochma is dedication. To be totally dedicated to something, to give yourself over to something, that's Chochma. So, okay. So in this context, we can sort of understand what that means, that the idea that there's this one purpose, one central purpose that I am dedicated to, because that is what will provide me a sense of fulfillment and purpose in my life. This is what I'm all about. But now I still make decisions based on, I'm still a rational being. I'm still a social being. I'm still a behavioral being. But now my personality, my way of seeing the world, I'm not always on that, in that space. Sometimes I revert back to one of my lower levels of functioning, of operating, of seeing the world. But they're all connected. They're all working together towards this one overarching goal. Now, we're talking about regular human beings there. Not everybody finds that one thing in their life that puts all the pieces together. A lot of people never get past the emotional stage, the social stage, which if you look, I mean, it's really not that much our business, but if you look at the political divisiveness that exists in our society today, so much of it has to do with the fact that people are still in, they haven't graduated from their school years, and they're still basically it's all about emotion. It's all about social perspectives, and very little to do with being rational, with being with judging things based on the actual realities, the actual information, the actual data. It's all about how it makes me feel. So we're living in a world of chaos, and the country's being turned over, and people are and basically you look at all sides. It's just a bunch of kids in high school, or in middle school going down and at each other. Except now that they're older and they have more adult tools to attack each other with. So that's how it breaks out. But the level of discourse is basically, even if it's dressed up sometimes in more intellectual terms, but that's only a cover. We see that really many people just don't grow up past a certain point, which, derech agav, as a side note, one of the ideas that, one of the reasons why the idea of taking from the Goyim, from the secular psychology and the secular outlook on life, to use to say that there is wisdom by the Gentiles, but their wisdom is more in terms of practical things. It's not so much in terms of the wisdom of life. And the fact that many of their ideas get into our culture and into our society is very destructive, because we're also seeing, in our world, we're seeing adults who never really made it to adulthood. We see, people who on the one hand are rejecting Yiddishkeit from purely emotional stuff. People who are just stuck in their Yiddishkeit, just stuck on a behavioral level. That's all it is. They're just okay, this is what society expects of me, so I'm going to do it. But they're not into it. We have this problem as well, and taking ideas from the secular world doesn't help these problems. It actually makes it worse, because to them, that's fine as long as you feel good, as long as you feel as long as you're coping, as long as you're managing, as long as you're getting by, that seems to be fine for them. But really, these stages, these progressions are in an animal soul, human soul. Before we even get to godliness, there's a fifth level. The fifth level is the level of Yechida, which sometimes in Chassidus it says that Klippa does not have Yechida. Now, Klippa, again, doesn't necessarily mean evil in the conventional sense of, serial killers. Evil means, Klippa means anything that conceals the truth of godliness. So we say that the souls of human beings, the human soul is comes from Klippa because the human soul perceives itself as existing separate and independent of Hashem, separate and independent of God. So that itself is a cover-up of the truth. So it's brought that in Klippa there is no Yechida. In other ways, it's brought that in Klippa there is a Yechida, which is you can't have it both ways, right? I mean, either there is or there isn't. So basically, the idea seems to be that what Yechida is, what in Klippa version of Yechida would be the idea of not just finding one overarching singular purpose that defines my life and what makes it all worth living. It's that there's a purpose that is so compelling that I'm ready to give my life for it. It's not the purpose that fills my life. It's not the purpose that drives my life. It's the purpose that I'm willing to give my life up for. In fact, this was a debate amongst the secular Gentile philosophers, the idea of is there such a thing? Should a person be searching for such a thing that's worth dying for? But the idea is that there does exist, and in fact, the Rebbe says that the most example that we have in our world, that level of commitment is a soldier, right? A soldier is somebody that's ready to die for his cause. He has a cause in life that he's ready to die for. That cause in life that he's ready to die for, no, he's not looking to die. Actually, he doesn't want to die. That's not what he's looking for. He's looking to live. But it's going to redefine everything in his life. His behaviors, his social context, his understanding of the world, his perception of what his purpose in the world is. It's all going to change. He has all those levels still, but when he gets that fifth level of something you're ready to die for, so it means that becomes it's not just the all-consuming focus of your life, but it becomes the thing you're ready to die for. That changes everything, even though again the other levels still continue to exist.
Sorry.
However,
Sorry?
But
it's a little bit
the
choppy.
idea.
Are you a little bit choppy? Sorry for disturbing.
The idea is
it's very choppy.
My audio is choppy?
It was.
It was. Okay, so I'm gonna have to get a little closer. Just my face in the screen. Okay, so the idea that when a person the idea that we said that in Klippa there is, in some places it says there is Yechida, in some places there's not. The idea is because in Klippa, when a person finds something in their life that is so compelling, and the cause, it's not now about my life anymore. It's about the cause, and the cause is so compelling that I'm ready to give my life for it. But that's something that came to by choice. It's not something that's innate. It's not something that's inherent to the human condition. Most human beings will go through life and never find anything that they're ready to give up their life for. So it's not natural to go looking for something that you're ready to die for. That's to have that fifth level. It's not a basic part of the human experience. Most people go through life, and the idea of the 5 levels of the soul as it is in holiness, as it is in the godly soul, in the development of a Jew in his service of Hashem and Torah mitzvahs. So in the godly soul, it's again, we start with the nefesh, which is a Jewish child is supposed to get a proper chinuch, and chinuch is primarily focused in those early years, is primarily focused on the behavioral. It's focused on learning to do the right things, what you can say, what you can't say, what you can, and to incorporate into your thinking, into your behaviors, into your speech, the basics of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, Torah mitzvahs. The next step is Ruach, as the language of the Zohar is Zocha. If a person merits, he's granted Ruach, which is the ability to develop an emotional bond, an emotional connection, an emotional appreciation in the social context. You start seeing Yiddishkeit from the perspective of the relationships, the relationship between the relationship with parents, the relationship with the siblings, in a Torah and mitzvahs context, a relationship with friends, relationship with a rebbe, a mentor, a relationship with the Eibishter. So to graduate to the next level is to relate to the Torah and mitzvahs, to Yiddishkeit from a relationship perspective. The next level is, if a person is Zeicha, as the Zohar says, he's granted the level of soul called Neshama. Neshama is practicing the same Judaism that he was practicing when he was a kid. He's involved in all the same relationships that he was involved in, but now it comes from a place of understanding. It comes from a perspective of understanding, being able to put all the pieces together, being able to understand priorities, importance, values, proportionality, what's more of this, less of that. This all comes from a perspective of how to carry out the things in life that are important. What's important in my spiritual life? What's important in my spiritual growth? What should I be focusing on? How do I make decisions based on values, not just based on what I was being told what to do, not just being based on my social circles, but also on my understanding. The next level, if he's Zeicha, a person is granted the level of Chaya, which is the perspective, the sense of seeing the Torah and the mitzvahs as the central overarching singularity of his life, the singular purpose of his entire life, and how everything else, including his rational thinking and his emotional relating and his behavioral activities, how all of that is all part of one central purpose which drives his whole life. But the fifth level is the level of Yechida. The level of Yechida is that place in the Jewish soul where it's not just about what fills my life. It's what I'm ready to give my life for. That this is bigger than my life. And Chassidus explains, for example, that there's a famous hemshech from the Rebbe Rashab called Eter, Tafresh Ayin, where he's focused a lot on the attribute of Das and how that facilitates free will. There's a conclusion to the hemshech which was written and not said. In the conclusion, he explains that when you get to the level of Yechida, there's no free will anymore. What you did was you surrendered your free will, just like we said that the closest example we have of it not in holiness is a soldier who completely surrenders. You completely surrender your free will, and you're ready to die for something. So because free will is all based on my sense of what's good for me, what's not good for me. How do I make choices? The whole struggle of free will that a Jew has is am I doing God's will or am I doing my will? If I don't have a competing will, there's no concept of free choice of free will, because that's all there is the will of God. So the Yechida level of the neshama, is that level of the neshama that's so connected to the reality of the divine that there is nothing else. It's not what's in it for me. It's not what fills my life. It's not what gives my life meaning and purpose. It's not what I value. It's not what I feel. It's not what I do, although there are things I have to do. It's about I'm completely invested. It's not something. It's something that I'm ready to give my life up for. So this level, when we say that it only exists in holiness, it doesn't exist in klipa, because in every single Jew, that already exists. You're born with that. The fact that every Jew has the capacity, as he says in Tanya, to give up his life for God, even if he doesn't, even if he's not feeling it, if he doesn't understand it, even if he doesn't appreciate it, if he doesn't like it, if he doesn't want to, that's it. When push comes to shove, a Jew gives up his life, screams Shema Yisrael, and then gives up their life, not to worship idols, whatever the situation might be. So this is something that's inborn. What Chassidus, the Yechida of Torah, is the idea that it gives us a glimpse into how these levels, as they exist within the divine plan for the world. And the divine plan for the world is, we don't have time to go through all the levels, but the basic level is the divine plan for the world has a set of behaviors. There's things you're supposed to do. God wants a world in which people are kind to each other. He wants a world in which people don't speak gossip about each other. He wants a world in which many different rules, right? In which people eat the right things and are engaged in the proper relationships and avoid the improper relationships. He has rules of behavior, rules of what he wants the world to look like, okay? And there are different levels how God sees the social structure of the world, the intellectual, as I said, we can't go through all the levels, but the ultimate level of Yechida as it's expressed in Torah, which is the divine plan and blueprint for the world, is a world which proclaims the truth, which is that God is everything and everything is God. And and instead of living in conflict with that idea, it's able to embrace that idea. Instead of God having to cover himself up in order to allow for the world to exist, so to speak, the world becomes a place where the divine truth can be fully revealed, and it doesn't negate the world. I have nothing else. It's not about me. It's about what just like when a person devotes himself, is committed to a cause in which it's not about my life, it's about what I'm willing to give my life up for. So it's sort of surrendering my own independent existence. So similarly, the idea in Torah is it reveals how the world does not really have its own independent existence, but really it's operating as an extension of and a manifestation of an expression of the divine. So, and this, there's obviously a lot more to it. Time is running late. But the idea, so Chassidus came along and Chassidus expressed, taught how it specifically, this idea of the highest level of the soul comes to the strongest expression of this highest level of the soul is actually in the lowest level of the soul, on the behavioral level. If you, for example, if the example we gave from the natural world is of a soldier, right? When you look at a soldier, what distinguishes a soldier from everybody else? His behaviors. What is the training of a soldier? The training of a soldier is almost all behavioral. And yet, this expresses his commitment, his readiness to give up his life more than the general or the war strategist, who to him, his involvement in the army is intellectual, or it's his career, it's his life career, it's his life purpose. The plain soldier who's just on a behavioral level, putting himself out there, he's the one that's on the front lines. He's the one that's actually putting his life on the line. He's not sitting back in an office and studying strategies. He's out there putting himself on the line. It's almost all behavioral, even though it's coming from a much deeper place. But the only way, something so deep and powerful, the only way that it can find expression is through the lowest, most tangible form of expression. That's again a lengthy subject unto itself that Chassidus talks about, why the highest can only come out in the lowest. But that's the idea of Yechida, this greatest revelation of Chassidus, of Pnimius HaTorah, of the deepest secrets, that Hashem says, this is what I've been waiting for. The whole plan, the whole purpose of existence, the whole purpose of creation is so that I can reveal myself to you without there being a conflict between your existence and being able to recognize and receive the truth of the fact that God is everything and everything is God. And that's only when you surrender your independent existence, not because you become less through the surrendering. Nobody thinks that a soldier is less of a person. In fact, in many areas in life, if a soldier could be far more successful in many ways, it's not about becoming less. It's about being surrendering yourself. So that level of surrender, that's that Chassidus explained that it's specifically the lowest generation. It's not the idea that somehow the plan got derailed and so Moshiach has to come for the lowest people of the lowest generation. That's actually the plan, because the highest level of total surrender to the divine truth and being totally open and ready to accept that divine truth, it comes from that generation that their strongest contribution is in the world of action. In our generation, what we've built, what we've accomplished, what one single individual who goes to a city can build and can accomplish is never existed before in history, but on a behavioral level, just doing it, doing the shlichus of the Rebbe, building Judaism, building a world which is an infrastructure for Torah mitzvahs. And even those of us that are on an individual level, the fact that I find it so challenging, the fact that I find it so hard, and yet I push myself and I do it, even when I'm not feeling it, even when I'm not appreciating it, even when I'm not understanding it, that actually itself is an expression of and a preparation for that ultimate revelation of the Yechida of the individual soul and the Yechida of the general soul, the Yechida being Moshiach, and the Yechida of Torah, the deepest secrets of Torah, most intimate connection that exists between the Creator and His creations and the Jewish people, with the coming of Mashiach, hopefully very soon. Okay.